Welcome to the Movement Code Podcast, where we help you decode movement, health, and lifestyle so that you can expand and grow. Hey guys, my name is Antonio Gerlay, your host for the Movement Code Podcast. I am a father, husband, business owner, rehab practitioner, and coach. Information overload has paralyzed many of us, and we are overwhelmed with good intentions and don't know what or who to trust. We aim to provide you clarity and confidence by bringing you expert advice for the everyday person. Thanks for spending some time with me today and enjoy the episode. All right, how's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the Movement Code Podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be chatting with Dr. Ginger Wolfe, who is a functional medicine provider here in Boulder, Colorado. And we go over a range of different topics, talking about supplementation and testing, and really just kind of getting a better idea of what a functional medicine provider actually does and how they can help you. And I found it very beneficial. I have not seen a functional medicine provider myself, and I connected with Dr. Wolfe because I've had patients ask me questions that I don't have the answers to, who wanted to also find someone who was not quote unquote mainstream medicine. And so we dive into that and we kind of break down what that means and what that is, because a lot of people are asking different questions, and we dive into some of the potential reasons as to why we think we're seeing certain chronic issues coming up. So if you like nerding out a little bit more about the granular stuff, talking about supplementation, maybe some of the theories as to why we're seeing autoimmune disorders, etc., I think this will be very beneficial for you guys. To hang with me, we've had a hard time with the audio on this episode, so it's a little broken up, internet connection issues and just some distortion. So I apologize for that. We've tried cleaning it up as best as we can, but nonetheless, the information is still very valuable and very good. So I'm really looking forward to you guys joining us on this and following along. Before we get started, one last thing is, if you have not done so yet, make sure you jump on our newsletter list. In addition to these podcast episodes being pushed out to you guys into this newsletter, you'll also be able to get some of our most recent updates and posts on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, where we give you guys videos specifically, usually based on teaching you how to move better, usually reviewing or rendering some sort of pain point. So that is the best way to stay up to date with some of the content we're putting out. And as always, if you subscribe to YouTube, you'll get those pushed. If you're on Instagram, turn on your notifications so you see those posts coming up. So we really appreciate you guys doing that, and enjoy the episode. All right, great. All right, so I wanted to introduce the Movement Code Podcast, Dr. Ginger Wolfe of Wolfe Functional Medicine here in Boulder, Colorado.
Hello, Antonio.
Of
Thank
course.
you for having me.
So, and I should have asked prior, do you normally just go by Dr. Wolfe?
I tell my patients you can call me whatever you want.
Okay,
as long
perfect.
As it's nice.
So as Dr. Wolfe and I were chatting with beforehand, we have not formally met each other yet. It's been more through the power of social media, on Facebook recommendations, etc. But Dr. Wolfe, as we introduced, is a functional medicine provider here in Colorado, and being in Colorado, I think a lot of people are asking questions about functional medicine, wanting different answers they're asking different questions about different health concerns or health topics. And Dr. Ginger Wolfe has so far been my go-to for referrals. So I'm looking forward to asking her more questions, because I myself do not really know anything about this area of expertise. As most of you know, Nichelle and I, we focus on more of a movement-based approach, much more rehab-based, while nutrition is definitely a strong component of that. That's about the extent of my knowledge and expertise and capability. So I'm really looking forward to asking some of these questions. So we're just going to kick it right off with, what is functional medicine?
That's the question I get all the time, and I really struggle with how to keep that answer short. But I will do my best today. And I feel like, it's a good thing that it's kind of a buzz phrase right now, functional medicine, right? I mean, we're talking a lot about it in Colorado, and I think it's really kind of catching on across the country as well. And I think that is a great thing because patients are starting to question what more can they do for their health? Like, up until now, they've thought that, they didn't have options. And when you start to hear this phrase and you look into it more, you realize that there's a lot more that you can find out about your health and you can get to someone who will dig deeper. So what is functional medicine? I will say that I hope on a large scale that the amount of practitioners who are practicing functional medicine are actually going about it with a natural approach and looking more at finding the root cause of a patient's health concern. In my practice, I like to explain it as full spectrum integrative internal medicine. So what I mean by that is that full spectrum, we are going to white glove everything, dig very deep, do a very comprehensive health history, look at everything we can possibly look at to sort of tie the pieces together, put the puzzle together as to what's going on with your particular health concern. Integrative, I mean, I'm looking at, sometimes we have to bring in the other side. Sometimes we do have to bring in mainstream medicine. We primarily work from a natural health perspective, so we're looking at natural supplements and things we can do to help turn your health around naturally, but occasionally we do have to cross over to that other side when it's necessary. And there are times where it is necessary. So in that case, I will bring in my nurse practitioner, and sometimes we have to do IVs, sometimes we have to get a prescription of some sort, but that's rare. But when we need it, we use it because we're looking at everything we can possibly do to get this patient better. Internal medicine, my studies and my background are, I have a diplomat in internal medicine through chiropractic, diplomat, American Board of Chiropractic Internist. So anything that you would go see an internal medicine doctor for, you could come to me for. And I think the thing that really sets us apart as functional medicine doctors, especially in our clinic, is the amount of comprehensive testing that we can offer. And it's not that these tests aren't available in mainstream medicine, it's just that they're so confined as to what they can actually do. So we don't have to work within that box. We can look outside that box and, like I said, dig deeper, run the tests that we need to run. So often I get blood work in from other doctors who are mainstream, and it's really not, in my opinion, it's not complete enough. There's so much more that you can look at, even in blood work, the most simple test you can get, that's just overlooked and not even looked into. So that's something that really sets us apart as functional medicine doctors. And lastly, I pride myself on this. I had a teacher who said, good doctors know what to do, but great doctors know why. And as a patient, you should always be asking your doctor why. Why are you prescribing that medication? Why am I even here? Why do I have this condition? What's happening to me? Like, your doctor should be able to answer why. So that is always my goal as a practitioner, is to be able to look my patients in the eye and give them the why to, their condition or what it is they're dealing with, and explain to them why we're going to do what we're going to do so that they understand it. But that's how I see functional medicine.
No, that's great. And I think there's a couple things that you had mentioned that I wanted to, I guess, emphasize, and I think emphasize is the right word. In the introduction, I myself am a doctor, you're a doctor, so we both are chiropractors. So we're actually doctorates of chiropractic. And what I want at least the listeners to hear and understand, because unfortunately, just like in all professions, there are some people that especially in chiropractic, when we say root cause, that term for sure is a buzzword that gets thrown around way too often because it's super easy to just say root cause. Now, you backed up root cause with a very in-depth definition of what you're actually doing, right? Unfortunately, in the chiropractic world, oftentimes the root cause is simply just seen as a spinal subluxation or something wrong with the spine. While there are 100% influences on how that can affect it, we need to understand that root causes, it's usually a little bit more complex than simply a spinal subluxation, which I think is important to know, because as you're doing your vetting process for practitioners that you're going to see, asking, well, like, what are potential things of the root cause, right? If they don't have another answer than just saying the root cause, that should be a flag that you need to look a little further.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, as a chiropractor, and I'm sure that you can agree with me on this, is that we sometimes have patients where, yes, they have spinal subluxation, and yes, we've worked on them, but you can just tell there's something else going on. There's something that might be creating some joint inflammation. Maybe it's even a mood disorder. Maybe it's depression, anxiety. There's a host of things in today's environment, and we pick up on those things. And that's kind of, for me, that was always something that I wanted to look into deeper and really focus on.
Yeah, no, I think that's so valuable. My wife and I, we always have this conversation, because there's a fine line of, obviously trying to grow a practice in a certain way and be able to provide value to, a number of people that would want what we're providing. But with that being said, there's, we want to be able to have more time to ask more questions, right? Like, and there's certain models of practice where, nothing against wellness models where you're coming in and you're just getting adjusted. That's great. But you need time to ask more questions, and you need a provider that honestly has the time or is willing to even listen to what those questions would be.
Yeah, that is why I solely shifted my practice over to the other side. Is it just became, it's like this burning desire inside of me to kind of investigate that side of things and really be able to sort of support a patient's health from that side. And I'm a big fan of all sorts of natural health care. I think there's a place for all of us, and I feel like this is a place where I can really serve.
Yeah, that's great. Now, what kind of practitioners or licenses can receive a functional medicine? Is it a? Sure. It's more than a certification, right? It's a licensure, right?
Yes, some of them are certifications. You can take it as far as you want, depending upon what's offered to you within your scope of practice or your degree. But medical doctors, chiropractors, naturopathic doctors, and licensed acupuncturists all certification courses. I did functional medicine university. I will say that I think that I always joke that I've been studying functional medicine since I was 5, because I had a mother who was sort of progressive for her time, and the slightest rash and she was like mixing something up in the put on it, but the last thing we did was go to the doctor. She just never trusted mainstream medicine, and she always thought that it was a better route to go the natural route. So I've sort of been engrossed in this for a long time, but I did functional medicine university just because I think as practitioners, we're always learning, we're always growing, and we need to continually keep that up. And then after that, I went on to go through the diplomate course provided through our chiropractic board, which was really intense and really was such a great education. I can't say enough about it. There were so many things I was learning all the time that were so exciting to me, because I could just, build on my knowledge and expertise.
That's awesome. So. Now, so it sounds like this kind of ties into my next question was, what is your story that led you into this? And it sounds like you've been around it to some capacity for a while.
I have. And, even though my mother was very progressive and she really did try to go the natural route, I grew up, in a small town in Pennsylvania. We were meat and potatoes. And, I mostly grew up on venison, which is healthy, but I wasn't getting a lot of healthy fats. And I had a mother who ran her own business at night. So, meals were kind of on us. We took care of ourselves. And we didn't always eat the best diet. So we had a lot of carbs, a lot of sugars. We grew up in a somewhat damp environment. And by the time I was in my mid-teens, I just started to have all sorts of, digestive problems. And eventually, I kept researching on my own and got to the root of that problem for me. And it sort of just spurred my intrigue into this world of really looking deeper, because my parents did end up taking me to several doctors and no one had an answer. Everybody just said to me, "You've got irritable bowel syndrome." And I'm like, that's just a diagnosis. I always say it shouldn't be called IBS, it should be called BS, because it's BS in my opinion. So, that was sort of my start down this road. And it wasn't always, intuitive, and there was a lot of studying and digging deep that went on for my own health. And I learned a lot through that. I always joke that I have like an arsenal of supplements at home, because I'm just constantly looking into everything. And I've been doing that for years, probably 25 years.
Now, with that being said, I'm going to jump ahead to another question is, what are, sorry, I lost my question here. Oh, what supplements is a big question. I mean, it's a $1 billion industry, the health and supplement industry. And it's a question we obviously get a ton about, like, oh, well, what supplements are good, or this or that. What's in the public best interest as far as going with more reputable sources? We use one that's called Metagenics. My wife did a pretty detailed vetting process for certain things. Companies that keep up with research, they're putting the right forms within them. It's not, it's something as simple as folate versus folic acid and different things like that. And now, and again, nothing wrong with people running businesses, but you see a lot of MLM companies and things like that are promoting health and wellness as far as supplements. So what should listeners and general public be thinking about when trying to find supplements? Obviously, getting the right supplement based on symptoms and different things like that. But aside from that, more of the vetting process of which products to use.
Right. Well, I think buying from reputable facilities, distributors is definitely it's up there. I mean, you get what you pay for with supplements, and you want them to work. I mean, what's the point of putting a supplement in your body if most of it isn't even bioavailable, or your body can't even assimilate it? And the problem with a lot of over-the-counter supplements, like something you might see at your local grocery store or at your pharmacy, so many of those, they're not a pharmaceutical grade supplement. So there are several fillers, binders, dyes, in addition to whatever the supplement is. Let's just say you're going to buy like a 5,000 milligram vitamin C. You may only be absorbing 50 milligrams of that. Whereas if you're going with a pharmaceutical grade supplement, those companies are held to a certain standard, and they have to be 99% pure. They have to be derived from natural substances, not synthetic substances. And because of that, they're going to be assimilated in your body much better. They're going to be much more bioavailable to your body. So when you take the supplement, you get what you pay for, right? So it's actually effective. You can spend a lot of money on supplements and have them not be effective. So I have my own online dispensary. I work with only, top-notch pharmaceutical grade supplement companies. I have several probably a top 5 that I really love, but certain ones that I like for certain things and certain patients. But they're all pharmaceutical grade, and they're all top-notch supplement companies. And again, the difference in price is not that much, but it's enough that it's going to favor your health much more.
No, that's, I mean, it at face value, it doesn't seem like it's that much. What you're end up paying more if you're not getting what you need out of it, right? Now, so you had briefly mentioned this. What are a few of the main tests that you find that you do that might be different than the mainstream medical system? So blood work alone, like that alone, is a pretty standard test. But again, and this kind of goes into it, I guess, is the difference between looking at normal within normal ranges, right? I feel like many tests, you're just like, oh, well, this looks normal within normal ranges. So what might be different that you're looking for as far as the same test and or different tests you might be providing patients?
I love that question because I feel like this is something where, just being educated on the topic, you could go into any doctor, any provider you see and know what to ask for. Otherwise, you're just, at their mercy. But in mainstream medical, you're going to see just common blood work tests like a CMP or a CBC. So we're looking at the blood count and then also the metabolic panel. And also, like you said, with those ranges, they aren't looking at optimal ranges. If you flag high or low within their ranges, those are actually average ranges where a patient is sick. So that's how they derive those ranges. That's how those ranges are established. I'm looking for optimal ranges. I'm also looking at a comparison. For example, I might be looking at, I might be looking for sort of markers for nutrient deficiencies, which they're never going to look at on a CBC, but it might stand out to me. It's not 100%. It's not 100% objective finding, but it helps put together the puzzle for me. And like I said, the more information I have, the more specific I can be. So blood work alone, we're looking at different values for just those standard tests. But in addition to that, my comprehensive panel is probably about 5 pages long. So I usually run a full thyroid panel. I'm not just running a TSH, which is kind of the standard in mainstream medicine. I'm running inflammatory markers. I'm looking at your vitamin D levels. Sometimes I run genetic SNPs. I'm looking into your lipid panel. I'm not just running a standard lipid panel, but I'll run something much more comprehensive. I'll run anti-nuclear antibodies to look for any autoimmune disease. Just several other markers that we look for that are really easy to put on any requisition form. Just to get more information about a patient's health, but I rarely get blood work that's that comprehensive that comes through my office. And that's a real disappointment to me because I think that overall it's a very inexpensive test to run anywhere. And I feel like it's a disservice to our community and our overall health. Outside of blood work, we also run much more comprehensive tests such as PCR stool testing. We will sometimes run heavy metal testing, mycotoxin testing, neurotransmitter testing. My hormone tests are all either saliva or urine. They're not serum because serum is just not, it's just not specific enough, specifically in female. Sometimes I'll run it on men, but rarely. So, we're trying to give you the best possible healthcare that we can give you and get the most specific answers that we can get so that we can give you the best
now. I personally feel that I am in somewhat of the healthiest form that I have been in for a while. Just, for a number of different reasons, but I don't I kind of feel like the same as you when you were talking about your childhood is we don't really go to the doctor all that much, which is funny because my sister-in-law is actually a general practitioner, and oftentimes at dinner table conversations, I'm not asking her for any personal questions about something, but she always recommends well, it'd be good for you to establish a relationship with a provider just in case something does come up. And I'm kind of well, I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So my long-winded question is someone in my situation or a similar story, what should we look at potentially periodically look for or test? Should I be, occasionally checking my oil or establishing a relationship with someone as yourself if I want to go down this non-mainstream way?
So with someone who's otherwise appears healthy and generally lives a healthy lifestyle, if you've never gone through this process before, I would say initially, yes, let's run that full comprehensive blood panel. Let's just make sure we're not missing anything. Let's just look at every aspect that we can look at to make sure that nothing's getting overlooked and we can address any potential health problems that might be silent right now. The other tests that I really would encourage most people to do is a stool test. And a stool test in our office is much different than what you get in mainstream medicine. It's so much more comprehensive. One, it's a PCR test, so it's much more specific than a bacterial culture. Sometimes I do get PCR that rolled through my office from a hospital, but it's still not as comprehensive.
Sorry to interrupt. What's a PCR test?
Polymerase chain reaction. So it's kind of like a DNA type test. The test that they run for COVID right now is PCR. I always joke with patients, it's like if you watch like CSI, and you see them take the DNA and put it on top of the DNA, and then we've got a map. So it's just very, very specific. And it picks up active infection very, very easily. So we're not getting, with bacterial culture, what would happen is you might be having a bacteria or some pathogen growing in you, but when you take the culture and you try to grow it out on a plate, it doesn't grow, right? So that's not as specific as a PCR test. You don't always get the results that you want with those tests. So this test is phenomenal for that. And not only that, it just looks at probably about 50 pathogenic type infections that possibly could be lingering in your gut, causing a low-level chronic immune response because of that low-level chronic infection. Those things are most often silent, and you really wreak havoc on your immune system. So, if you appear otherwise healthy, it's a good test to have because you'd like to know if there's any potential, problem kind of growing in there or hanging out in there. Because sometimes all it takes is one little thing to tip the scales, whether it's like a physical, a chemical, an emotional type stress situation. You can tip the scales, and those little low-level infections can turn into big infections. The other problem is if they're in there for long enough, they eventually do cause a problem and a disruption in the immune function of the body. And that is why we're seeing so much more autoimmune these days. So doing a gut test, a stool test, I think is really important. Also, just because most of your immune function comes from your gut lining. So you want to make sure that your gut is functioning properly and the immune system's, functioning properly. It's not on overdrive. It's not too weak, and there aren't too many bad guys hanging out.
So that kind of stems into the next thing I wanted to ask. What are some of the trends you're starting to see just as far as Western society's lifestyle and habits? Is it more of these quote-unquote autoimmune disorders that are coming up, or were they already there? They just weren't recognized and diagnosed? I'm curious to get some of your perspectives on those.
I think it's highly on the rise, and I think it's due to the amount of toxins, chemicals, environmental toxins, chemicals in foods, chemicals in vaccinations, if we dare go there, things that we're introducing into our bodies from a very young age. And that was another reason sort of why I shifted this route that were coming in with autoimmune 6-year-olds with ulcerative colitis. That should not be happening. So, yes, I will say autoimmune thyroid disease is very, very prevalent right now. Lots of food sensitivities, not just gluten, not just dairy, but a lot of different food sensitivities. You can have a food sensitivity to a healthy food just because of a disruption in the immune system. If you have a hyperactive immune system, going on long enough, if it's always on overdrive, eventually it's going to short circuit and it's going to start attacking things that it shouldn't. So it's always good to check into that on a regular basis to make sure that immune system is functioning in a healthy manner.
And I think that's what's so interesting is like you hear these these stories where individuals say like, oh, I have a food sensitivity to, just pick like a random food. I was like, that seems very just random.
Yeah, like blueberries, right? Or God forbid kale and bulgur. But it can happen. And it generally happens with foods that you eat often. I see avocados a lot because, we know that eating healthy fats is good for us. So some people get carried away and eat like 3 avocados a day every day. Well, typically the things that you eat on a regular basis are sometimes the things that your immune system, when it gets a little wonky, it starts to react to those foods. And really all a food sensitivity is a low level autoimmune reaction. So you have to look at it just because it doesn't have an autoimmune condition, disease name doesn't mean that it isn't sort of an autoimmune issue with your health, because those small little autoimmune issues turn into large autoimmune issues.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now I'm curious just to see, and I think it obviously be just like any question, it depends, person dependent, etc. But what do you recommend as, let's say, as like kind of a generalish guideline for not a specific diet, but dietary recommendations, right? I know some people are maybe a little bit more prone to, a keto-ish base type of diet might be best for all, or, that's starting to get a name on it, paleo. We know well-balanced whole foods, etc. But do you find or lean towards people needing more fats than maybe they're already getting, or whatever that might be?
I typically don't 100% jump into any particular branded diet. My dietary plans are sort of patient dependent and depending and whatever sort of their treatment calls for. But I will say on a more general basis, yes, I think we get way too much sugar. I mean, insulin resistance is really the main cause for cardiovascular disease right now. So anything that turns to sugar, I mean, as a society, we just eat too much sugar. So, lean meats, fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, healthy proteins, nuts, seeds, things like that. And look at balance, having some balance. I'm not, sometimes I have to have patients on a very strict diet, but my goal is not to have you on a super, super strict diet your entire life, because let's be real, we all want to live life, and some things are good for the soul, they may not be good for our body. So, I am a big fan of eating healthy fats. I think it's really great for our metabolism, for our brains, for our hormones. I don't think we get enough healthy fats, because for so long we were told that fat is bad, fat is bad, and not all fats are bad. Healthy fats are really good for you.
Yeah, no, definitely agree on that end. Now, I do find it interesting how deficiencies can create such a wide range of symptoms in people, and more importantly, how certain deficiencies, and we're just using this as an example, like magnesium is very important for improving absorption and conversion of other things, etc. What are some of the more common deficiencies you see, and how many of these are preventable by actually jumping off the dietary question, right, through a balanced diet?
So, like you mentioned, magnesium is probably the number one deficiency, and most people don't even know it. But I would say most of us are magnesium deficient. Other deficiencies that I see all the time, I see, your methyl B vitamins. That's really, really important for, several processes in your body, for decreasing inflammation, for improving liver detoxification, for mood, just so many things that are tied back to vitamins. So that's another deficiency I see all the time, and that deficiency can also lead to anemia. So over time it can lead to cumulative toxicity. That deficiency can really lead to cumulative toxicity. And anemia. So that's another thing that we see quite a bit here. Vitamin D is always one that people are talking about and looking into. I do agree with vitamin D supplementation when it's needed. If it's summer, I usually try to get the patient to get it the more natural route. The reason being is I will have patients come in and, they're taking like 5,000 IUs of vitamin D every day for like the last year. And vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so it can become toxic and it can create toxicity in the body. The other thing that can happen is it works kind of like a hormone. So if you continue to take it, when you stop taking it, your body won't want to produce it. Now, so you don't want to, use vitamin D as a crutch consistently, maybe just a short crutch in the winter if you aren't getting enough sun and you're deficient. Those are the main ones that I see. Sometimes, unfortunately, I don't think it's possible to sometimes get as much as you need through your diet, and that can depend on a number of different factors. If you have a genetic SNP for MTHFR, you're probably not going to get enough methylcobalamin, methyl B12, and methylfolate just from diet. So especially, if you're in in your 30s and on up, because at that point you just have had so much cumulative stress in the system that you need to supplement it in order to make sure that you're functioning.
Yeah, no, and it's I should have had my wife on here to piggyback some of these questions, because this is definitely way more of her world. But she works exclusively with prenatal and postnatal, and this is what her prenatal intake talks about for probably 20 minutes. So she's talking about diet and supplementation, because it's not just about you anymore. You're building another human, and these things need to be on point.
Right. And that MTHFR SNP, I will add, is highly tied to tongue ties. So, if you aren't doing pre-conception planning, that's one of the things I like to talk to patients about if I get the opportunity. I usually give yourself a solid 3 months before you start to try to get pregnant, because let's fix some of these things that could potentially cause a problem down the road. We want to ensure that you have the most healthy pregnancy, that your baby's healthy, that you're healthy, and start off on the right.
Yeah, no, that's so good, because we get a few people that'll reach out to us before they're basically kind of like, they know my wife works in this world, and they're kind of like, hey, we're thinking about maybe starting a family soon, and I think she has a PDF that she'll just send out to people that basically is just like, okay, well, especially if you're on contraception beforehand, right? These are some things to consider, and this is what you should be starting to take to just help build up that beforehand. And what's super interesting too, it's another one of those questions: were they there before, or are we just seeing them more because they're it's kind of the buzzword, but lip and tongue ties is huge, and she has been really making it a big part of her practice of supporting women through that lactation process. Because again, no offense to other chiros, most of it assume that a lactation issue is a subluxation or structural problem, which if the baby's not turning their head, yes, makes sense. But you have to assess the suckle. You have to look at an evaluation for those tether oral ties.
Right. And I think that, these conditions are exponential right now, and I do think they're on the rise. I started practicing 20 years ago, and I wasn't seeing either objectively or just hearing from patients subjectively about these things. That really sort of came into play 5 years into practice, and you look back at how we've changed our foods, how we've changed vaccination schedules, how we've farmed in this country, the amount of chemicals, the cross-contamination in all of the farming in the United States, the amount of glyphosate in all of our foods. Those things are all being introduced to us at a very young age. So we're coming into this world with an immune system that's just being bombarded. And I think we're going to continue to see this. I think autoimmune diseases and these types of conditions are going to be on the rise. And eventually it needs to be addressed. I do also think that is why we're looking for functional medicine.
So this is an interesting point, because if they're being introduced at a young age, but yet it's so mainstream with how our lifestyle is. I mean, let's say, for instance, someone wants to make the right decisions. They want to start eating healthier. We'd obviously have to start outsourcing and resourcing towards local produce that's not doing these things correct. But other than that, is it fixed through, supplements and other things like that? Because I'm just thinking more from like an internal thing, right? If we're introducing chemicals and toxins internally, we're trying to do our best to avoid those certain things. But what could we potentially introduce to help turn back the hands of time, essentially?
Right. That is, that kind of leans me towards the topic of, should we be supplementing every day? And I do think there is a lot that we can do to offset and negate the damage that we are, sort of involuntarily exposed to on a regular basis. And I also think it's necessary because to some degree it's just unavoidable, right? So when I take my supplements every day, and a lot of it is to offset, that damage, that oxidative stress to your body. And there are also things you can do for your kids. I'm not opposed to starting a couple of these things at a really young age. I mean, just something as simple as an omega and a daily vitamin for your child could really be helpful. But the more you do when they're young, the better chance you give them as they grow into an adult, the more you can do to optimize their health in their future. And that, I don't think it's ever too late to start working on your health. I want to emphasize that, but I'm a huge proponent of making sure we take care of our kids and make sure that we're doing everything possible for our children so that we're not stacking all of these things, all of these cumulative toxins up in their body, and they end up, in my office in their mid-20s, just a wreck. Their health is just completely, out of sorts, and it's a huge uphill battle at that point. Something that I turn around and work with patients all the time. But one thing functional medicine is it's usually not an overnight type thing. This isn't, I'm going to give you a pill and you're going to feel better tomorrow. That's not how it works. I'll give you the tools and the skills that you need to turn your own health around, and I'll be here to hold your hand. But it's work.
Yeah, and that's the big takeaway is that we always tell this to people too, right? Like I'm not fixing you. When I see people for my low back program, whether that be local or remote, which remote even emphasizes that just like most of what you do, right? It can be telehealth, it can be remote, which I think is very fascinating and very powerful, because I don't want people to use us as a crutch towards them either not getting the results or the results that they need, right? It should be fairly self-sufficient, and we just want to be that guide to help open up possibilities and doors or opportunities, if you will. So we're talking very granular, right? What do you do for your own fitness and health? What's kind of your routine or your lifestyle right now, being a small business owner, et cetera?
As I've been doing this now, this is my 20th year in business, and I've really started to lean towards making sure that I have a very balanced lifestyle. So balance between work and home, relationships. I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie when it comes to exercise, and so I have to make sure I take care of myself because of that. But I do love, I love running. I love cycling. I have done some extreme racing. I've done one Ironman. I'm probably never going to do one again. The work that you have to do on yourself afterwards, because I know what my optimum health is, and I know that I wasn't after that. So, but I enjoy racing. I enjoy like the fun of racing. So, obviously this year I'm not going to be racing at all, but I think I'm going to stick to like half marathons and anything less than that in the future. And getting proper sleep, I think, is so important. Making sure you have fun, making sure that you have gratitude for what you do have, and you aren't focusing on all the things that you don't have. Those are the big things for me. Obviously, I supplement and I try to eat well. I do eat meat, but I stick to non-inflammatory meats for the most part, and splurge on a steak every now and then too. We have to, to have some enjoyment and to stay healthy while we do it. But I'm not 100% clean all the time, but I would say I'm probably 85%. But I like to have a glass of wine every now and then. And I think that's okay to say, because I want patients to understand that I'm normal too. I'm just like you. I like to splurge on some things. I like to have a piece of cake every now and then too.
Everything in moderation, including moderation.
Hey, everything in moderation. You shouldn't be deprived, but you should, as a whole, be focusing on living a healthy lifestyle every day. And you have to, look at all of those aspects of health: exercise, diet, relationships, keeping stress to a minimum.
Well, it's interesting. I had Dan John on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's a well-known strength and conditioning coach. And one of the things that came up was someone asking, he told a story about how he was at dinner and someone was like, "Oh, well, did you have dessert or something like that?" He's like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "It's not an issue to have dessert. It's an issue when you have dessert every single day. That's what the problem is."
Yeah.
So I love it. Well, I have exhausted my questions. This has been awesome because I learned a lot myself. And I'm super, more so from just a local perspective, excited to learn more about what you do and being able to use you as a resource for my patients and my clients, et cetera. But is there anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap up?
I will
Yeah, please.
quickly, because I think it's one of the questions I get all the time is, well, what do you take every day?
Hmm.
And I think I'd just like to put that out there because I do think it is helpful. One of the things I take every day is glutathione, and I think it's because this is coming up with deficiencies again. But I don't think that we are. I think we're deficient in glutathione, which is our body's most potent antioxidant, and we're constantly exposed to things that are causing an oxidative response in our body. So, by taking glutathione, we can help negate that. I also take a mitochondrial supplement, anything that's going to improve, cellular processes in the body, improve energy, and just allow our body the energy to heal if it needs to heal, because our immune system is constantly being triggered. I also take my methyl B vitamins because I do have an MTHFR SNP, so those are really important for me. I take an omega, and when I need to, I take a vitamin D. So occasionally I'll throw in a multivitamin, but those are the supplements that I take on a regular basis. Aside from that, I eat a lot of dark leafy greens, and I stick to, like I said, mostly lean meats, fruits, and vegetables.
Awesome. I love that. That's a good list to be able to put up, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. One thing I did forget to ask you, which I usually ask at the beginning, I apologize. How can people connect with you? What's the best way to learn more about you, what you do, your practice, or just connect?
Thank you so much. You can reach us online at www.drgingerwolfe.com. That's Wolfe with an E. Or you can call us at 303-447-2225. We have an online schedule as well, so some people like to call, some people like to schedule online. And we always offer free 15-minute functional medicine consults. So if it's something you've been thinking about, or you just want to know more about and know how it can pertain to your particular health situation, that's a great way to come in. We can do it virtually. We can see you in the office, get to know you, and I can explain what I can do to help you. And also, I'd be more than happy to help you, Doc. If you want to do those 2 tests, I'd love to do that with you, and we can sit down together and
that'd be great, because I don't even know, honestly, the last. I will say this: probably the last time I've had a test was just when I gave blood or donated. And they just gave me the just generic thing that you find out from that.
Knowledge is power, and it allows you to take even more control.
No, I love it. So. That's great. And honestly, what I should add, just because you brought it up early on, one thing I am more interested in is the stool test. I've never been clinically diagnosed with, let's say, IBS, but like you said, it's kind of like BS. It's kind of always just been a fast transit type of time, and my wife always jokes sometimes, but she actually helped me out with I take a magnesium and a glutamine, and zinc have actually been helping a tremendous amount. But lifestyle wise though, things do not help it, such as too much of this. Coffee, definitely, and with 3 kids under 5, I seem to drink that at a very equal balanced amount of water. But the other thing that I've also found out more recently is alcohol. Alcohol, definitely, on those weekend days where I don't have as much to do, where I maybe have a little bit more whiskey, I can definitely tell my gut lining or my gut just in general, don't know if lining, is just different than what it is on a normal basis. So obviously lifestyle things permitting, but I think it would be interesting to find out what's going on.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. So that would be fun.
I know. Only in our world would we think messing with poop is fun, people.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again. This has been awesome. It was really nice to virtually meet you officially and chat about what you do and learn more about your practice. I know just from the listeners that thus far have been interacting with me about the podcast are going to find this very valuable and very interesting. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love that we can talk about this, and it's great just to get more of this out there, so people know what their options are and can take control of their health.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right, guys. So I apologize. We're going to splice this in because at the end, just due to time and everything else, I kind of got a little off track and I forgot to ask Dr. Wolfe for a challenge. So the challenge that we want to encourage you guys to do, not only for this week, but also really just moving forward, is to ask the question why. So as we stated in the podcast, good doctors know what to do. Great doctors know why we're doing whatever intervention that is. So this week, what we want you to encourage you to do is start looking kind of on a daily basis. Is just like, why am I doing this? Is this benefiting my health, right? So for instance, a lot of us, we talked about supplements. Why am I taking this particular supplementation? Were you just told to take it at some point in time without really understanding why? So maybe you need to reach back out to your practitioner that recommended that supplementation. Why am I doing this particular exercise? Is it benefiting me? Why is it benefiting me? What is going on in my life that is trying to benefit? Okay, now moving forward, this is even just as, if not more important, as you go down the road and you have more interactions with healthcare providers and they want to suggest some sort of intervention, we want to encourage you to ask why. Why are we doing this? What is this going to change for me? So that is your challenge this week and moving forward. Thanks again. All right, guys. Thanks again for tuning into the Movement Code podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Again, I apologize. The audio was a little bit, it was a little off. We were dealing with some internet connectivity issues and whatnot, but we just wanted to roll with it because it had been hard for us to schedule that interview. And I'm glad we did because it was a ton of great information. And I'm looking forward to connecting with Dr. Ginger Wolfe myself and doing some of the blood work and other tests that we had discussed about, just because I want to know more about my body. I want to try to continue to improve my body. I want to continue to try to be as healthy as I can and not just kind of coast by. So again, if you're in Boulder, be sure to look her up. She's just right in Boulder here. If you're not, you can always look up on her website and just learn more about her, gain some of the knowledge and understanding that she's providing and giving, and go from there. Be sure to follow her on social media if you have not done so. I will post her handles and her information on the show notes, so be sure to check those out. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Once again, subscribe if you have not done so already. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review. We'd love to get the feedback from you guys. And always reach out to me individually. I would love to hear more about the topics that you guys want to hear about so I can bring you more and more valuable information. So thanks again.